say that we all had outhouses and we should not have indoor plumbing, you know? I mean, just because that's the way it's always been done doesn't mean that that's the right way. So I'm not advocating one way or the other, I'm just saying I don't think that's good.
Well, I mean, that's...
Yeah, I don't think it's our decision.
No, it's not our decision.
No.
Well, you'd have to change the policy, which is why I brought it before.
But I think that the administration has to, they have to review it, decide that it's a good idea or not a good idea, and then bring it to us with reasons based on what you have said. I don't think it's our call to make that change.
Yeah, I would potentially recommend the board to consider the rules if you want to bring your information and present it to Mr. Schrader. I think he would openly listen to what you have to say, the rhyme, reason, and rationale, and could prepare information back and have it be on a potential committee meeting as appropriate, the findings of this conversation and then where it goes with the input that was generated, and then ideally the handbook is established and you make a mid-year change. It's a little atypical, but annually review that handbook.
I totally agree. I think it's a good administration. Discuss it like that.
But, you know, I can see where, you know, you make a change like that, so now you cut the time down, and then if there really is an issue with kids not being able to make it back and forth in time, I mean, it's worth looking at.
Mr. Schrader's he's been hearing about it as well. So I know this isn't an agenda item and it's informational only, and that really is not on the agenda for discussion to talk to, because we should be talking about items on the agenda. But the board discretion to acknowledge this official use.
I'd be interested in administration and staff's opinion, pros and cons.
We've talked to some teachers, and most of the ones that we talked to were for it, just because they'd rather not have the kids be like, and they don't really have a problem with backpacks in the room versus a bunch of books. We discussed with Mr. Schrader, and he said it would probably come better coming from us students, so that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Well, I'm just gonna add, when I was in high school here, I think we had backpacks, but that's beside the point. My only question is, I can't find the board books online anymore, and I was trying to find out in the consent agenda whether or not we have, the board has approved the hiring of Spanish teachers. I don't know, am I missing something in the last, it wasn't on last month, wasn't on this month, I couldn't find anything. So I guess I'm just wondering if we have a Spanish teacher.
We do. It's the hire's been on a long-term sub position, so he's hired, but not as a full-time teacher, as a one semester long-term sub.
Thank you both for bringing it.
IB administration.
Thank you. Tonight we're going to hear a report on our school report card, and Mrs. Martin's going to further discuss individual school results and our district results. But as part of my report, I'd like to show just a short video from State Superintendent Tony Evers. It's a minute and 30 seconds long. And this is going to set the course for our potential discussion that we will have when we get to our school report card. So if you would turn around, we'll be up here shortly. And we can listen to Dr. Evers' opinion on our...
Hi, I'm Tony Evers, State Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Report.
I'm here today to tell you that the school report cards will be coming to your district soon. Now, this is the third year that we have had report cards for every single school in the state, and the second year that we have had for the school districts themselves. While I truly believe that these report cards are great communication devices, they're good ways for the school district to communicate with parents, with the business community, and so I want to caution that it is only one picture. It actually measures a relatively narrow band of things about schools. It doesn't get at really some of the things that I know across the state that people value in their schools, such as extracurricular, such as music, art, physical education, such as career and technical education. So make sure when you're trying to discern how your school and school district is really doing that, the report card plays an important role. I don't dismiss that, but I'm encouraging parents and community members to really take a look at all the things that they value in the school when they're making these types of judgments. And in addition, the report card is for one purpose, and that is to identify what is good practices in school districts and what schools are struggling, not so we can punish them, so that we can find ways to help them improve. This is all about continuous improvement. Thank you.
Okay, so with that said, that's our introduction into the report when we get to our state school report card. As well, I'd just like to mention this week, if Mr. Schrader may comment on a little more, this is our homecoming week for Weyauwega Fremont, and across all grade levels, we're participating in the school spirit events, leading up to the end of the week with the various activities. Tonight you see the majority of us are in pink for the different events that are going on throughout the district. So again, annual events where school spirit runs strong and pride runs through, and we're happy to create those opportunities for us.
For my board report, it pretty much stands as printed and
What she didn't cover.
okay. As far as homecoming is concerned, we have a big volleyball, big pink tonight happening. Full building started this evening, JV football this evening. We have cross-country matches this week, more volleyball tomorrow. Wednesday night will be the boys volleyball game, followed by the girls powder puff activities. That all begins at 6 p.m. and then we'll move outside for the powder puff afterwards. And Friday night with the football game, parade in the afternoon, pep assembly, starting at 1 o'clock. So lots of activities, and then wrapping it up with the dance and something that we said.
I don't have a whole lot, anything else to add yet besides what was presented in my board report, although I would like to highlight, if you wouldn't mind, is that the year got started off, I think, very well. Enjoyed welcoming the students back with the kind of balloon parade that they come through. I told you saw that in the paper, which really kind of, I think, sets the tone for an exciting year for the elementary students. Where all the elementaries, as was already mentioned, are participating in what we call Spirit Week, which coincides with homecoming. Today was pink day for all the kids. Tomorrow the class is all dressed in different colors, kindergarten red, first grade orange, etc. Wednesday is Hat Day, Thursday Pajama Day, which is always a big favorite, and then Friday will be your WF Apparel Day. We'll be celebrating our first food of the month this Friday. That's the character theme program for the student council, which is always, I think, a good reminder for the kids about like, the theme being responsibility this month. Just a good reminder to keep the kids on board with the different expectations in the school. Picture day was Friday. A lot of good-looking folks that day. So Weyauwega Horse and Buggy King and Queen, Jim and Pat Billick visited with the students on Friday. That was and they had a sharing time, which was really interesting. Some of the highlights were the silver coyote pelt certainly got everybody's attention. They brought artifacts that were found on their farm. Jim talked a little about it. Apparently he has relatives 14 generations ago or whatever that came over on the Mayflower and really couldn't get back up. So that was very interesting. That was new for me. Wow. And then our step volunteers, we had the breakfast that was here last week, which was always great to see those folks coming in. Probably, I mentioned this in my board report, but I still like to say it out loud. It was really great to see one of our step volunteers who saw a young man that he worked with last year in 5th grade who was here in the middle school library And, you know, he went right over there to say hi, and I could tell the young man, could see him from a distance, and he probably didn't feel as though he could go interrupt, you know, the meeting that was going on, but eventually they found time to go see each other and say hi and catch up, and I think that's really a great thing to see those generations, really working together so well. So anyway, just a couple more things. I felt so good about that stuff, I just wanted to make sure I spread the good news.
I'm gonna talk more, later during the school board, or the report card presentation, but one thing I did want to point out in my school board report was that, this summer, our autism effectiveness team, which is a group of 5 special ed teachers that we have in the school, they've been working for the last 3 years to educate all our parapro staff and the other special education teachers, and they've also done some trainings for St. Paul's Daycare. They were recognized by CESA 6 this summer, and of all the 42 schools in CESA 6, our particular autism team was shoulder tapped to present that training this summer because we're being recognized as a district that's extremely effective with working with autism. And those 5 teachers, I just wanted to mention to make sure they got recognition, are Mary Jo Booker, Jamie McMullen, Tracy Butler, Kristen Dolan, and Stacy Bolter. So congratulations to them. That was a pretty big honor to be chosen for that.
Lastly, I'd like to introduce Drew Nehan, our potential new business manager. A little bit later, the board will be addressing the consent agenda, and Drew will be potentially our new business manager to assist the district, and we'll hear from him in just a second here. The board would like to update the financials within your board book. If you've noticed that the general Fund 10 monthly notices in there are a reflection of last month. They have not been updated through the transition period through Mr. Nehan and Mr. Storch and our October meeting. Both the August and September update will be included for review. As far as future expenditures and expenses that you will see in your book, they are active and up to date, as our central office continues to process invoices and expenditures and take in revenues as we have been accordingly during this transition time. The monthly reports from AFG represent the medical and dental summary as indicated from AFG, and you can see the flux within that. Our dental, I'll just point out, shows that into the negative approximately $7,000 to $8,000, and if we look last year at this time, it was trending at the same fashion where it dips down and then gradually works its way back. So we need to put a few more months under our belt before we take a sterner eye on our progress, but monthly to evaluate where we are. Drew, would you like to introduce yourself?
As Scott had said, I'm Drew Nehan, and I'm excited for the opportunity to potentially be working here.
I'm Steve, Board of Education. Something received the qualified nominee for Region 7, we'll have the board of directors that have looked at these from the final
Just one comment as we enter the fall and the political campaign season that's taking place throughout the state of Wisconsin. And one of the topics that typically comes up at any time where there's an election, commonality or themes that people end up focusing in on, one is education. And this fall, we have our incumbent Scott Walker and Barry Burke will be challenging him for the governor's race. And I challenge our community as well as our board to thoroughly understand both gubernatorial candidates and what their mission and vision is towards education. And as we learn more about that, that we all pay attention to the priorities that you feel are important to our direction and vision within our district as we move forward. But that will play a factor in education in the next 2 years, and we should pay attention to how that goes over the next several months. And regardless of who's in office, it's our responsibility to follow through on initiatives and programs and the accountability that
what her intention was to talk about that, and just share a little bit about that.
Jeremy, what were you saying before?
The gold cards for juniors and seniors that are in good standing, they have the opportunity to.
I didn't know that.
Six, approval of previous minutes, 6-8 committee of the whole, 9-8.
I'll make a motion to approve the committee of the whole meetings.
I'll second that.
Questions, comments on the minutes? All in favor for approval? Aye. Opposed? Carries. 6B, Special Board of Education meeting, 9/8/14.
I make a motion to approve the special board of education minutes from 9/8.
Second. Questions, comments on all in favor of approval? Aye. Opposed? Carries. 6C, Special Board of Education meeting 9/8/27/14.
I make a motion to approve with the deletion of 3 words and the addition of 1 word. Those 3 words to be deleted would be on the last sentence. The words or recommendations were to be deleted and replaced with the word was. So it then reads, no formal motion was created.
I'll second that.
All in favor for
Let's have discussion. And the reason for my changing that would be to go to the committee of the whole, page 1 of 3, meant the bottom paragraph states that there was action done, but it may not be considered formal. So I removed the formal recommendation out of it. The first meeting that we approved was committee of the whole for the week.
But where did you direct us to that?
The bottom of page 1 of that minute. So we're on committee of the 8th, page 1 of 3. It's the very first colored sheet here. The bottom paragraph. From that meeting, I think there was things done, but because it wasn't a quorum, I don't think it's referred to as a formal recommendation. So I'm taking that out and saying, no formal motion was created. And that's how I do the motion.
All in favor for approval with the change?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 6E, regular Board of Education meeting, 8/25/14.
I'll second that.
balance. If I multiply that twice, my math comes out to $47,097.07. Does that sound right?
It's 4,700.
I'm sorry, is that what I said?
47,000.
I'm sorry, I said it wrong. I meant 4,700.
Right.
There was long discussions on scoreboards at the high school level in which there was sponsorships involved. And I guess I was just curious as to what sponsorship drive was done on the scoreboard.
There was none. It was placed in the middle school. The bid, budget last spring, it was determined that we were able to make that purchase and just upgrade within the facility in the middle school.
I think we're missing an opportunity for sponsorship on scoreboards. That's all I have.
I know in the high school, there was concern about sponsorships at that time, with the names being present and continued reflection of the original sponsors that were out there at that time. We had a discussion on that, so that was taken into account to not repeat potential.
The middle school scoreboard had a sponsor on it, which was no longer
Right, it was
business.
Sam one, I think it was, right?
But I believe sponsorships for scoreboards should be an annual or maybe some limited time, not annual, because people go out of business and then.
Well, you know, I would just, because I did the marketing for my bank, and I know that that's something that I call the schools and see if there's something we can sponsor.
Sure.
You know, so, you know, sometimes companies are looking for that opportunity to give back in some way, so I agree, you know, that I think it's something that we should,
I think there was a real opportunity.
Yeah.
I do know that the last time was controversial.
Yeah, and I don't know what happened there, and, you know, I can
You were
certainly
on the
see.
board at that time,
No.
but there was a controversial.
I'm just saying from my standpoint, well, I agree, you know.
Some of the conversation had to do with, were they lifetime sponsors or were they limited to maybe they were five, some limited. I just thought that scoreboard in that first.
I totally agree, just gonna go to one once decided on the fence, and then they did. But I also know that there's advocacy about it.
Ms. Smith? Yes. Danville?
Yes.
Neil Murphy? Jim Smith?
Yes.
Debbie Burnham?
Yes.
Doug Ehrenberg?
Yes. 7B, August monthly cash receipts.
Motion to approve.
Seconded by Jim. Discussion on the cash receipts. Roll call, please.
Debbie Burnham?
Yes.
Jim Smith?
Yes.
Danville? Doug Ehrenberg?
Yes.
Cindy Smith? Yes. Neil Murphy?
Yes.
8, old business. K-3 science gifted and talented for.
The topic or agenda item of science gifted talented is asked to be part of our monthly meetings, and it's on our September meeting for potential discussion. There's been no, I guess, real progress forward addressing this topic, noting that we're in the first 3 weeks of school, getting sent into our fall semester classes. Again, as repeated before, as we push off the class selection moving into next year, there will be increased needed of sections of science credits via the increased science requirements from the state from 2 to 3. And at that time, we'll be looking at the needed potential sections of science classes to meet our students' needs. Potential additional staffing would be considered at that time and thus directed by the board to implement prior to that as well. And if gifted and talented, Marty Rada is beginning efforts within several resignations and hires this evening. Resignations of Todd Brewer, JV football coach, grade room trainer, middle school, high school course instructor, Tony Jaworski, network administrator, Beck out, JV baseball coach, and Simon Zarger as confidential assistant. And as well recognizes several hires to the district, such as James McConnell, elementary music, Jennifer Jacobs, first grade teacher, Todd Brewer, seventh grade football coach, Todd Brewer, assistant high school football coach, Susan Rucks, high school special education teacher, Rebecca Mitchell, paraprofessional, Brett Ruppel, bus driver, Luann Rupno, middle school, high school course instructor, Diane Cole, student council advisor, Riley Johnson, school council advisor, Dwayne Newby, network administrator, John Drew Nehan, business manager, and Patrick Martin as middle school, high school math teacher. We thank our members on their time to our district, and we welcome new individuals to our district with great things next year and beyond.
Welcome. And how would you like to be addressed?
Drew, please.
Welcome.
There, it's official, no more potential.
Okay.
10 new business, 10A 2013-14 school report card.
As a preface to our report that Mrs. Martin will give, we're going to go over our annual school report card results from this past school year, which is a direct reflection of our district and how it's performing academically. And notice the comments Dr. Evers played into the discussion. Mrs. Martin may expand on those even a little further as we get into the discussion on school report card. Second year,
As Mr. Bleck is pulling that up, I just want to give the board a little history level lesson because not all the board members have been here since this began. Back in 2001, President George Bush put a policy into place called No Child Left Behind. In that, there was provision that every single student in the United States be proficient or advanced by a certain deadline, and if schools weren't able to achieve that 100% proficiency for all students, regardless of their ability, disability, economic status, states had to put in a waiver. Part of that waiver for the state of Wisconsin is twofold. It's the teacher effectiveness project, which our district and all public school districts are participating in, and it's also the school report card accountability system. So as Mr. Bleck brings this up, if the board wants to turn around and look at the screen, what I'm going to do is kind of tell you how to read the report card, and then if there's any further questions on that, we're going to go one school at a time. So the first school that popped up here is Fremont Elementary. On the left, what you're looking at is a rating system from green through red. The highest rating a school or a district can possibly receive is significantly exceeds expectations. And that is the rating that Fremont has once again earned. That was their rating last year as well. And Mr. Bleck, can you pull that down a little bit? On the bottom of the left side, the school information, if you pay note to this box as we switch from school to school, the demographics switch significantly throughout our district. So things that they're looking at for school information is, what grades are in that building, how many students are in that school. So Fremont is our smallest enrollment with 152 students. But also you're looking at the race, ethnicity, how many students with disabilities attend that school, how many students are economically disadvantaged, how many students are limited English proficient, which comes off of our access testing. Let's go up to the right column, Mr. Bleck. How they determine the rating then based on all those factors, there's different things here, and each of our 5 schools is judged differently because the elementary has a very different judgment system than the secondary schools, and that'll be evident as we go through the report cards. Student achievement is just strictly how are our kids performing in that school. Student growth is how much progress did the kids in that school make from last year to this year. So the schools that are performing the highest actually have the hardest time with student growth in this area. So you can see the numbers there are a little bit lower in student growth and student achievement because the bar was set very high in Fremont when the first report cards first came out. So growth is a little bit slower going. It's harder always to move the kids at the top. Closing gaps is how are we doing if we have reading gaps, math gaps between, let's say, economically disadvantaged students and non-academically disadvantaged. Are we closing those achievement gaps, maybe between students with disabilities, students without disabilities? And then on-track post-secondary readiness, this is where the report cards really vary. If you look at the bottom of this box here,
Now, Fremont Elementary doesn't have an 8th grade math achievement score. They don't have an ACT participation score, graduation score, because that school is not judged on that. The high school will be, and you're going to see what a difference that makes when we get to the high school report card. But attendance rate is on as a basis of judgment for all the schools. So that puts, a lot of work in Mr. Schrader's hands and Mr. Nowak's hands to make sure that they're really making those phone calls, and if students are having attendance problems, reaching out and connecting with the family to see if we can stop those problems. So let's go ahead, now that we know how to read the report card, let's skip ahead to Weyauwega Elementary, I believe is our next school. Weyauwega Elementary earned a rating of exceeds expectations, and that's where they were last year as well. Now, Weyauwega Elementary, if we go down to the box on the bottom left, very different school makeup than Fremont Elementary. Almost double the amount of students in the school, and then you're seeing some differences between the student populations represented in the school. Now, if we go up to the upper right column, Mr. Bleck, again, looking student achievement on the top, how are the kids in that school doing? The growth that they're making, closing the gaps. The numbers here in closing the gaps is a little bit higher because we have a few more disadvantaged groups, higher population of disadvantaged represented within that school, and then on-track readiness again as well. Before we move away from the elementary report cards, does anybody have any questions on any of the elementary report
I
cards?
hear you say double in Weyauwega.
Well, I was generalizing. I know it's not exactly double.
It's about 34 kids. I have a room at 186. I think.
Okay, let's skip on to the middle school then. Okay, middle school. What we have here for a rating is that the middle school is meeting expectations. Now, let's just stay here for a second. Mr. Bleck will stay over on the right column. Some of the other factors coming into play, and all of a sudden at the bottom on the right, the 8th grade math achievement test is on there. So that's adding another factor that the elementary school does not have. Interesting to note here, for the last several years in a row, the elementary school has won a math award from AWSA, and that's the Principals Association that recognizes the achievement of the middle school in math versus the other middle schools. Some of the programs that we put in place, because we can always make improvements, even though these are very good scores, we always want to be at the top of what we can possibly be. You'll remember the board recognized our addition of the Math 180 intervention program in the middle school, and that has been working very well, and I think we're going to see some factor in that next year when we look at the middle school report card for next year. Any questions on the middle school report card before we get on to the high school? Okay, high school, we're going to see a lot of different factors coming into play now. The high school is being rated on all the categories that are possible here. We're, again, looking at the achievement testing, but now we have the ACT test coming into play. Now, board, what I want to point out, and I'll remind you of this again next year, this is the last year that it was optional to take the ACT on this last 13-14 report card. Coming up this year in March, every public school student in the state of Wisconsin that is a junior will be required to take the ACT. And that's going to change the playing field. Last year we had about 40 students in the school that chose to take the ACT. This year all juniors will be required. And that will also be their college placement test. So that's going to be something that's definitely going to be a factor. The other thing I really want to point out here is our graduation rate and the numbers that play into there. Mr. Schrader, I can't compliment you enough, but Mr. Schrader gets lists from our registrar and from central office of students that are living in our district that either haven't enrolled, that are on the census, that may potentially be dropouts. He literally drives around to all of those houses, knocks on the door, meets with the families, and makes sure that those kids get enrolled in the schools. So that's definitely having a factor on our graduation rate there. Okay, so the high school was given the rating of meets expectations for this school year. One thing I forgot to point out, I'm sorry, when we were on the middle school rating went up 3 points. Questions on either of the secondary report cards before we get on over to the charters? Okay, let's go ahead to the charter school then. Charter school, you see, is in white
not on the color grid of red, yellow, or green. That's because the charter school is given an alternative rating. They simply do not have enough students in that school to give us a report card rating. But on the right column, you will notice that they're still grading our on-track post-secondary readiness. They're still grading how we're closing those achievement gaps in our student growth and student achievement. But because there are so few students attending the charter school compared to other traditional high schools and middle schools, they simply will not issue further rating except to say that we are making satisfactory progress. If we were not making satisfactory progress, they would let us know.
One additional follow-up can be to the conversation on the charter school this past week, the Weyauwega County Charter School, which is directed and ran by CESA 5 out of Portage. We had our fall meeting, and last year at this time we talked about the accountability scores and how they relate to individual districts. And over this past year we've done some investigation to ensure that the scores of our students attending the charter school are coming back to our school and being reflected accurately. For practicality purposes, our district is the only district that receives the charter school report from Weyauwega County Charter School. That's due to the configuration. But the grades themselves and the progress of the students do go back to the original host schools that participate in the district. And I believe we have 2 students over in the charter school this year as well. Their scores come back to us as well as other students. Their scores go back to their home districts respectively as well.
Any questions at all? Okay. Mr. Bleck, is there anything you wanted to add? Conference comparison?
Sure. I'll take a quick here and I'll find that for you.
Angie Landsberg from the paper came in and did a story that will appear in the paper, so you can watch for that and wait for that on the school report cards. And she will run comparison. She usually runs between the Weyauwega School District, ourselves, and Iowa Scandinavia, the 3 districts receiving the paper. What we ran here is, if the board wants to turn around again just for a second, we ran a conference comparison with our athletic conference, and then we also ran a county comparison because folks always want to know how we measure up versus our peers. So if you're looking at the top, the conference comparison, we're following number 3 on that grid. We have Iowa Scandinavia, Amherst, and then on the county comparison, you can see the most.
One thing I want to point out on these comparisons is that, relatively speaking, you're looking at a span of 5 points or 6 points among all schools, which is really a narrow spectrum, to compete and compare on, so that overwhelmingly districts are meeting their expectations as noted in their accountability rating. Obviously, we're looking at ways to improve that. Meets expectations is a great recognition, but as shared this past week when I sent an email out to staff on our results, we appreciate the recognition of meeting expectations, but we know that there is room for improvement. As we look at other districts that are exceeding expectations or significantly exceeding expectations, as Dr. Evers mentioned, we need to engage in more practices and activities to support that type of end result from our district. So as collectively as an admin team, and I know it is, I'm sure, of the board, we continually move forward in enhancing our overall accountability. That will be our goal for the 2014-15. Any other questions on?
Everybody check the demographics of our I'm just saying because
Right.
I read the paper.
With respect to all school districts, each school district presents different waves and processes of educating children within their environments. And like I said, we have, and we've looked at that. There are some demographic differences, but I think that's unique to their district. And results are reported accordingly.
I'm just saying I read the paper yesterday that these are just actually it was in the paper. ACT test, yes, students that have an IEP, a special education plan, will be allowed to have the same testing accommodations that they usually do, but all those students will be required to take that test. So some of them will take it in perhaps a small group environment. I'm assuming that'll be a hard test to motivate some students. Right. The motivation factor that's built in from the state's point of view is that it's their college placement exam. So if you can remember the summer before students go to college, they usually have to report to the college and take that placement test to see what level of math or English they'll test into. This is now that test.
But there's no motivation for this one.
Mr. Trader's going to work on that internally.
Mr. Shader for the motivation, good.
It'll be interesting to see what the ACT state average does over
It
this
will.
next year. Historically, the Wisconsin ACT cup score of 22.1, I think it was this year, nationally ranks in the top 5 historically. But now we're a state that only tests students that want to take the test. The state of Illinois has been practicing this for several years where all students take the ACT. I have a feeling that the scores may not reflect as they were this year when the entire state takes the test. It's a goal, obviously, to stay the same and build forward. So the results will be very interesting to see if they norm out compared to where we were last year or under the norm is set. One of the ways I can kind of correlate this in, 2 years ago, our WKC scores had a new cup score where they identified a new threshold of this is what's acceptable for meeting the achievement. I have a feeling that this next year ACT scores will be similar to that and set a new cup score of what the state average may.
Sure. Can I ask a question with ACT? I know, I think you take it on fifty, right? I don't remember what.
$45.
Do the students pay the fee? Does the school cover the fee?
The state will be
The
covering
state
it.
does. So that is a definite plus for students and families that the cost for that assessment will be picked up by the state. So that's a positive.
Many students going to college will take it more than once.
They can, and that will continue to be an option for students to take it more than one time.
Gone through a few of these things with Scott. Pulled a few things at the bottom of this sheet that were, testing the date to see what ideas for people to treat me. That none of these have to be done now. We're gonna see ideas as far as what we want to do. I think that come the committee meeting in October, we can come back with ideas so we can possibly set an agenda together as far as what topics we want to cover. So we're not going in there and just sit down and say, okay, what do you think? Thoughts?
They're very good. Some of them are very good.
You might not want.
So we don't even know. Cross that one off.
I think the third one, review committee structure, ought to be at least discussed, do we want to continue doing it basically how we do it? Certainly the fourth one, examine and prioritize the top 2 or 3 challenges, and identify strategies for resolving them. Relationships. Probably basic purpose to the last one. Assess the school's long-term facilities and property needs. Kind of doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like the 4 you mentioned.
And the information presented these are just ideas. These are ideas that boards commonly look at as potential agenda items. If there's something unique that the board wants to bring forward, by all means, that's your responsibility to bring those forward for discussion. case, I would, compensation, ideally a retreat in, Webster Dictionary is like 2 days long, and what they designed for a true retreat process. School districts have morphed that from 2 days to 1 day, Saturdays potentially, where the whole idea is to start in an environment that is atypical of this, create a different atmosphere, which may allow for sort of casual conversation on potential and varied topics. I know through time that us taking on this role look different through the years, and they recommend going off campus and having it somewhere else, including dinner essentially looking for a recommendation from the board to approve the wildlife and outdoor rec as a science credit earning alternative for our high school students. Remember at our committee meeting, Candy and I presented on the curricular crosswalk for those two classes that Sandy Dykes currently instructs, and that it has met the Department of Public Instruction's guidelines to ensure that the next generation science standards are part of that, and that the class itself is a legitimate science class experience worthy of credit earning from a local school district. For that to happen, the board would need to recognize that yes, we support this movement forward to allow these two classes become science class credit earning alternatives for our students to potentially take.
Can I just verify one more thing? These are classes she already teaches, so it doesn't require her paying for others.
Correct.
What's the downside?
I hate to think there is, the downside is
Well, I guess
positive.
my point is, this all looks good. Am I missing something?
You know, we did this,
Maybe I said it.
yeah, I don't see one right now. You know, it hasn't come up. We've had two other classes that have gone through this process. We haven't seen a downside to that. We have another class within Renee Humphrey's in our base program, the food science, that is in the process right now of going through the same regimen that potentially may come forward. As Candy had mentioned before, what this does for somebody that is science driven, I want to take as many classes as I possibly can that are district science related. Now I can take that class and be assigned a science credit earning opportunity, whereas before this was just an elective credit. So if you're going into a college, university, work, or trade course, and they see, wow, this student had maxed out on every possible science course in this district, they're serious about it. So it's an opportunity to demonstrate their commitment.
I don't know, Greg, is it too soft of a science credit? Is that why it wasn't accredited in the past?
No, I don't believe so. The opportunity to create this crosswalk came up within the past few years.
The crosswalk is the auditing process
Right.
that ensures that it has the fidelity within it. Everybody in our science department has to.
Strong as opposed to soft, is that what you're
Right,
saying?
yeah. And the Department of Public Instruction also has to authorize that they're seeing the curriculum is science heavy and warranting of a science credit.
Can't see a downside, I want to know if I did it.
I don't see them.
Make a motion to approve the science equivalency credit for Weyauwega Fremont School District wildlife and outdoor recreation curriculum. Second,
You mentioned one or two classes?
There's two.
What are the types?
Outdoor recreation,
For recreation, one?
wildlife.
And wildlife.
Wow, that's how you, I thought they were the same thing.
Wildlife, you're right.
Maybe.
got that,
Yep.
and second. Other questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 11, calendar and future agenda items. 9, that's the first school round in October, or our
I'm sorry, what's that?
October 9th, is it?
October 9th, we'll have two events going on that evening, starting at 5:30. AFG, our current health consultant will be presenting in a half-hour increment, followed by Ansay and Associates, and then Tricor Insurance. Each of those vendors have been allotted a half hour, 20 minutes for presentation, 10 minutes for questions and answers that will start at 5:30 in the IMC here. And then at 7 o'clock, Team Benega will be back with us that night to start the process for the community awareness of our facility, study and educational analysis. I sent over a brief article to the County Post today for review that should be in this week's paper, inviting stakeholders from our community if interested to participate as well with that. This week as well, that letter will go out to the members of our strategic planning team for their interest to be part of that event as well. That'll take place at the 9th at 7 o'clock in the IMC.
Did the letter go out to parents in the district?
It'll be in the newsletters. We're going to include it in the newsletters.
This is the night.
Dawn, who's Lee Beers? Usually fair.
Wouldn't he have bite?
Like,
Come on,
I'm saying just come from.
Where do you pluck that from the calendar? I don't know where you.
There's state order.
Student state, from DPI, you have to be recognized.
State law.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Children's Fish Day.
Yeah, it's about.
I just thought you were having some calendar that.
No, yeah.
And they, it seems like they add one every year.
If you have one, we don't know you're gonna have to report.
The 13th committee of the whole at 6:30, and the 27th is regular board at 6, budget at 7, and special meeting at 8:30, approximate time, so. Anything else?
On the 20th, we would have our retreat.
That's 6:30.
6:30, I believe, was the start time. then.
20th.
Unless you want to change it.
Could I?
Yes.
We're talking about the, was it 500 policies? I ran them off, this is what the amended did. I recommend the administration team go through them, make sure they're in line with our handbooks. I'm not sure, like we talked about master agreement yet, things like that.
Right.
So,
There's verbiage in there that does reference,
Yeah.
master agreement, so on and so forth, right?
and how do they relate to the handbooks? I guess, there should be consistency there.
Right, if it's referencing the master agreement, without having it in front of me, it probably should reference the Weyauwega Fremont professional staff handbook, in that correlation, depending on what that subject is addressing.
And are the handbooks part of our policies? Or should they be in that policy?
Board approved handbooks, I don't know if they're specifically referenced, and there could be an opportunity to include that into some potential.
It just seems, that should be looked over, because it is, like you say, way out of date.
Right.
And I don't know if we want. Yeah, that's what I would recommend. And then I did make a recommendation, to look at a social media policy. No, we had an email policy. Am I right, Scott?
We have an acceptable use email policy, correct? Or,
Or you'll write it, you'll get a figure at it, that's. And Scott did, give you some, did you make copies for yourself? too?
I have, Dawn received the email of the copies.
I did ask Scott to get some copies. He gave it to me, I know they're here. Oh, here. So if anybody else. He did not. I don't know, how do you feel about that, Scott?
Well, what we can do is, an admin team, we can go through and look for the glaring
Yeah.
changes, anything that references contracts or something that may be outdated in that regard, if it's a union or organization, and highlight that for potential change.
Oh, I got the key.